Got a bright light?
Go. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Contemporary Issues. We're going to talk about a pretty current topic today, marijuana and CBD, and why are so many seniors using it these days? They double and triple the number of seniors in the last few years. So we'll look a little at that and what it's being used for and what we think about it too. So I hope you've come prepared to tell your stories too, or at least your opinions on what you think about this. So with that, let me welcome Rev Jerry to our class 2. Rev Jerry Butler, our pastor of discipleship. Nice to have you here today. Hope you'll share your thoughts too with us on this topic.
Okay, it was Lauren last week and you this week. You're spying on us. I know.
We're on probation.
The
word is getting out about
Welcome to Zoomers too. Just want to tell you we have about 20 in class today and 10 or 11 on Zoom. So welcome to you all. We're having a little 60s party here today. We've got playing some 60s music and we've got some samples going around here. Nobody, please don't consume the samples in the church today. It would probably not be a good idea, just from a PR perspective.
Too late, Steve.
Too late. I made a little visit this week to a dispensary for the first time and bought a few little flowers and some edibles so folks in the room here could see what those look like. If anybody doesn't know, which I didn't, so we're learning a little bit here too. And also there are chocolate brownies that Alice made, but they have nothing in them except regular flour. Right, Alice?
Right.
Okay. So Zoomers,
That's already gone.
we wish you were with us today in person, but that's what we're doing. We're going to talk all about this topic today. First, our usual announcements. Zoomers, please mute yourself in the lower left corner of your screen so we keep the background noise down. And we are recording this for future playback. And I hope everybody will comment on our topic today, but don't dominate also. Sometimes we have folks who get so excited, they love these social issues we talk about, that they want to comment after every few minutes, and so please control yourself. And other announcements. Any first timers in class? I don't think so today, but anything else?
How is Terry doing?
Terry, we're glad to see you here. We know that you are undergoing some therapy and hope that you are doing well. Prayers for you. Okay. You bet.
The only thing is that I wanted to get a list of everybody's names, and I thought addresses so that we could put it on a general sheet. There was a couple of people that signed up that would be on our list to send cards and things like that if people were sick or had needs. So if you guys would think of it, or maybe I'll just pass around. I want to get your addresses is what I'm getting at. So maybe I'll just bring a sign-up sheet in and have everybody.
For our social committee.
For a social committee also too. So we've got emails, but no addresses. So I'll just bring a clipboard in.
Okay.
Do that.
Sounds good. Okay. And I've also got on my notes, be sure and do a prayer. My wife Vicki always says, you forget to do a prayer. This is a church class and we will do a prayer at the end. So
I'm sorry.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Okay. Okay, so let's jump right in. And when you've got a comment, just raise your hand or shout it out, and let's make this informal because it's a good topic for discussion, and one certainly in Colorado that's been popular in recent years. Well, here is a picture of Rick Steves. A lot of you probably know Rick Steves, the travel writer and host of PBS show on travel. And Rick is a proponent of marijuana use. And he wrote a great little column. And I want to just read a few highlights to you because it summarizes a lot of these issues really well. And he starts it off by saying, I'm a hardworking, kid-raising, church-going, tax-paying American. And if I work hard all day and want to go home and smoke a joint and stare at my fireplace for 3 hours, that's my civil liberty, in his opinion. He says that 50 years ago, Richard Nixon declared war on drugs, and at that time made marijuana public enemy #1 and made it in the category, Schedule I category of drugs alongside heroin, where it remains to this day federally identified in that category. Rich said, as a travel writer, I've seen how other nations, especially Netherlands and Portugal, have tackled the complicated issue of marijuana in ways that are more effective than ours, both in money and the toll on human lives. While it's true that marijuana, like any drug, can be harmful and abused, it's also true that there are smarter ways to deal with it than America has. And we can pragmatically reduce the harm without locking up so many people that we have. He says that since the 1990s, more than 35 states have legalized marijuana for medical use. And since 2012, 18 states have made it legal to consume marijuana for enjoyment, recreational. He says that legalizing recreational marijuana would have many effects. Many supporters predict only the upsides, but there are a lot of things people don't know and question. Would teen use increase? Would road safety suffer? Would there be a gateway effect with more people? Would society become one big hemp fest? And he says that statistics, in his opinion, have crept up in some of these categories, but the worst case scenarios have not played out, and that public attitudes are changing. He said that the mystique of marijuana has gone away in the last decade. Pot is now being used by mom and dad, and grandma is rubbing it on her elbows. In Washington, where illegal marijuana use once rivaled apples as a cash crop, marijuana is now a legal market generating $469 million in tax revenue to the state of Washington. That money goes for drug awareness, as well as roads and other positive uses. He says, we are now at a threshold, in his opinion, where most of our country allows marijuana use, either medical or recreational, and Congress is debating making banking easier for the marijuana industry. These common sense changes are being accepted by more people and allowing the cannabis business to be federally overseen by the banking system and restoring many people's right to use in the privacy of their own homes. So interesting. And by the way, Rick Steves has spoke at St. Andrew here before. It's been about 12 to 15 years, a few years before my time here, but we may see him having him back because he's spoken on political topics, travel, and on these kinds of social issues too. So he's an interesting guy. Any thoughts on that, Zoomers or folks here? Anybody heard that Rick Steves was an advocate and done that? Not many people know. Okay. Let me share with you a CNN article that tells a little bit about some of the statistics. Seniors smoking or using edibles has doubled from 2015 to 2018. In 2006, only 0.4% of seniors over 65 used weed in the past year. In 2018, it was 4.2%. In national surveys, 48% of Americans say they have tried it, and 6.5% of high school seniors admit to daily use. It's Washington and Colorado, they became the first states to legalize recreational marijuana in November 2012. So really, this has been just in the last 10 years that so much of this has been going on. The CNN story quotes Carol, age 70, saying, I eat my marijuana gummy each night before bed to help my insomnia. I take this little cube and it makes me drowsy and doesn't leave me groggy in the morning. I also use a topical cream with THC and CBD for pain relief, and I find that it works. I would not have done this if it was illegal. So a lot of folks in that position. The evidence, according to the CNN doctor that's quoted in this story, he says there's not really been that much study of and results of marijuana and CBD controlled studies showing that it's effective, but there is a lot of anecdotal evidence. Uh-huh,
I want
Alice.
to make a comment.
sure.
We have a daughter who is an oncology nurse, and I was telling her yesterday what we were going to talk about, and she was saying that they're using it a lot with oncology patients these days, and they're finding it extremely effective, and there's a big study out there about it. I asked her to send it to me, and she didn't follow through, she was busy. But anyway, just want you to know that the medical industry is finding it's really effective, especially with serious illnesses. So,
I think with chemotherapy.
well, chemo and,
Yeah,
yeah.
they give a lot for that.
Yeah, we'll
From
get into that.
pain perspective? Yeah.
pain and, well, and they're also, I saw something on the internet the other day that there's an interaction with some of the other drugs and what's going on in people's bodies, you know, so.
If she gets that study, that'd be great to
Yeah, I
read.
know. I
Yeah.
will.
I'll cover that a little more here too in just a minute.
Oh, I'm
too, Alice.
sorry.
That's okay. No, I'm glad you said that because that's what we wanted to hear. If anybody has direct experience or relatives who are in the field and are telling us about this. The story says that the danger, go ahead, Jim.
We have, we use it for unusual pain. And our doctor, we told our doctor that we were doing this, and she said that there is evidence that it enhances dementia.
It makes it
That
worse.
it makes dementia progress faster. In response to that, I went home and spent over an hour, about an hour, looking to find anything on there because I respect her and she's really been a very good doctor for us. This is a Kaiser doc, and this is the Kaiser party line. This is their protocol. I couldn't find anything. I couldn't find any evidence that said anywhere where any authority tied the two together.
Okay.
So I don't know whether this is a hangover from previous worry about CBD and things like that. But
Maybe it's one older study that they're relying on.
so we are, or just older prejudice that she's relying upon, and we continue to use normal ibuprofen and things like that, but becomes unusual or anything like that, when then we turn to CBDs.
Okay, very good.
Do you,
Okay, thank you.
question,
Um,
do you use a topical or are you
I
talking,
can't hear.
is it a topical CBD or when you ingest?
Well, topical primarily, but if it's really interfering with sleep or can't do it, then we take gummies.
Thank you, Jim. Well, just a little bit about the dangers pointed out by a doctor in this CNN article. He says that there's some evidence that folks who've had recent heart attacks can have some interaction with marijuana and CBD, and also drug interaction, especially blood thinners. Warfarin, he said in particular, marijuana may increase the concentrations of warfarin in the blood and increase the risk for bleeds. So marijuana could affect a senior citizen's ability to open and manage their medications also. So that's just a couple of the things that they have mentioned, as well as overdose by accident. Since seniors don't know often how much the dosage is, that some of them are running into problems eating a whole marijuana cookie, which may give 2 or 3 or 4 times as much dose as you should have for your body weight. So they just want us to be aware of that kind of issue.
Steve? I
Yes,
was gonna mention, I'm not for it, I'm not against it, I'm still working, so I can't risk. I can't risk it. It's just-
Yeah.
There's too much unknowns, so I can't risk it. But as an athlete, CBD, I wonder about whether that would help injury when you get hurt. But what you were saying, there's a National Institute of Health article that talks about what you just said.
About a relationship between
Yeah,
CBD and
But it's the other way, saying that it helps
See, that's,
Alzheimer's disease. And it's a National Institute of Health, so it's kind of like, it seems like you talk to 10 people and get 10 different opinions, even scientists.
You should send that to Steve and let him send it out. to the-
Yeah, I can do that. It's a National
Send it
Institute of
up.
Health, so it's a good article.
I found that in my studies today, or looking in my layman's approach to this topic too, that there were some that said it helps that or it doesn't. It's like alcohol or aspirin. We got studies on both sides.
Both sides, right?
So it's continuing. Okay, here's a picture of a budding out marijuana plant. And here's the flower and the bud at the top. And they have what's called sugar leaves. It's one type of leaves. The fan leaves are another, and stems at the bottom. And I guess they take some of these different chemicals from different parts of the flower. So let me tell you a little bit too about just basic description of marijuana from the NIH website. Marijuana, also called weed, herb, pot, grass, bud, ganja, Mary Jane, and so many others, is a greenish gray mixture of dried flowers of the cannabis. When you smoke a joint, the active ingredient THC goes into your lungs and then the bloodstream and then directly to your brain. It only takes a few minutes to get high when you smoke it, whereas if you eat it, it takes longer because it has to be digested. Once in the brain, the THC activates receptors, which gives you the feeling of being high. In short, marijuana changes the chemical balance in your brain, and that's what is referred to as the high. Some people smoke it in cigarettes and others in pipes, water pipes called bongs, or blunts, which is a cigar wrap. Marijuana can also be used to brew tea, and it's used when it's sold or consumed for medicinal purposes. It's also mixed into foods, such as brownies, cookies, or candies, all kinds. Just one little piece of history in the United States. Marijuana's history in American culture began during the colonial era, when hemp was a critical crop. Hemp are a relative to marijuana. So colonial governments in Virginia and Massachusetts required landowners, farmers to grow marijuana for hemp-based products. Thomas Jefferson and George Washington were notable cultivators of hemp, and John Adams was a recreational user and wrote about hemp's mind-altering powers. There are several types of marijuana, but they are often aimed at they are often in 2 categories, either making you very relaxed or energized. Users have favorite types of flower for each effect. And just a little about CBD, also a definition. CBD stands for cannabidiol. It's a chemical found in marijuana, but it doesn't contain the psychoactive ingredient THC. Studies have shown that CBD may reduce chronic pain by affecting the receptor activities, blocking the pain in effect, reducing inflammation, and interacting with neurotransmitters to block pain. The usual CBD formulation is oil, but it's also sold as an extract, vaporized liquid, or an oil-based capsule. So they have all these different forms of these things. Food and drinks and beauty products are among those with CBD in them. Currently, the only CBD product approved by the FDA is an oil called Epidiolex. It's approved to treat 2 types of epilepsy. Aside from Epidiolex, state laws on the use of CBD vary widely. While CBD is studied as a treatment for Parkinson's, schizophrenia, diabetes, MS, and anxiety, research supporting the drug's benefits is still limited. If you plan to use these products, talk to your doctor. That's what all these websites are saying. The federal government still classifies it as in the same category as marijuana. And so, but CBD has become an essential part of the medical marijuana community. And there's lots of these little graphics out here on the internet that people use to promote CBD. So let me stop there for a minute and ask you all, does anybody else use CBD and in what form? And what's been your experience with it? Anybody? Sue?
I get mine from my chiropractor
Okay.
and I get it in a little round cylinder like, it might look like deodorant or something, one of those. And I just rub that cream on my back or my knees, wherever I'm having issues. And it takes the pain away.
Okay. Zoomers, in case you can't hear, some of us, we talk quiet in the room sometimes. Sue said she gets it from her chiropractor and uses the cream on her back and her knees. And it really helps with pain. Yep. Melinda?
I have the same one probably, but it hasn't done anything for me.
Hasn't done anything for Melinda.
Yeah.
You must know.
I've used it on my hip and I'm gonna have hip surgery in March, have a full hip replacement. It works wonderfully to, for the rest of the day, cuts out the pain from my hip now. But I did notice that in the preparation for the surgery in March, that it says to stop using it before it. And so it's apparently, because they're gonna then later give me blood thinner. And so evidently they're already implementing that in terms of, there's an interaction, so you don't want to be on it. So, and I think it's been wonderful. And I would not have used it if it were illegal. And I don't want any THC in my stuff. I'm not looking for a high, I'm looking for a low for the pain threshold.
Yes, something to block the pain. But it's interesting how it's being studied and so many anecdotal stories about how it's effective, but not completely proved yet. Sharon?
We were gonna have an alternate health fair here, and so Joy and Susie and I went to a place in Heather Gardens that was selling CBD in
Okay.
an elixir form, and did they have an appointment too? Well, we all tried it there. Nobody really noticed anything. And then I bought an elixir for myself and my dog, thinking it was gonna calm her down. Didn't do anything for either one of us. I don't know, did you ever do anything? And Susie gets it from her chiropractor, uses it on her skin. I know that one, but, and I have tried the other marijuana too. That's totally different.
That did something for you. Huh?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
But I went to a shop down in Larimer Square. My friends from Virginia came probably 6-7 years ago, and he's an advocate for AA. And so he promotes all this stuff once. He wanted to find out what it did and how they sell it. So we just went in, we didn't buy anything. It looked like a spa. They had the fish tank. It was, and they take you to a little room and stuff like that. It was pretty fancy. I don't know how much it cost or anything, but pretty glamorous. It made it look
It's
glamorous.
a big business. Yeah.
Then I
One of
went to
these
another
little-
one in Aurora. It was just people lined up at the door for, they had these big jars. It was ugly. I didn't get it there.
One of these little packets was $20.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
expensive.
so now they said about one cigarette. Yeah, so that's what
What are the
it
packets?
is roughly.
$20.
No, what are they?
That's the marijuana
actual
leaf.
flower.
That's the
Oh,
flower.
Is that
that
to
you
roll a
can
joint?
roll up. you smoke.
So,
And I will admit to you, while I'm thinking of just a second, Vicki, yeah, in case anybody wonders, I've never used it myself. In high school, I smoked cigarettes for a little while and tried it and didn't like it, thought it tasted bad and knew it was bad for you. And so I just was never interested in smoking marijuana. And that's all we did back then. But of course, all my buddies used the bong and all that. And so I'm late coming to this game and trying to be open-minded about this.
yeah, but tell them what you told me about in college. You know, you like to sit around with it because you like the smell of it, but you didn't want to smoke it.
Kind of smelled like fresh cut hay to me. Kind of a wonderful smell.
Well, I have a really funny story. I have a bunch of high school girlfriends that we still get together with, and we went up to Breckenridge one time and stayed up there. And we all got to talking and decided that we thought it would be fun to go to a dispensary because none of us had ever been to one before. And none of us knew anything about it. And so anyway, we jump in our minivan and we go looking around for one and we find it. We get out and here's all these, I don't know, at the time we were probably 65 years old. These old ladies go walking into this dispensary, you know, and the door opens and like 8 of us walk in and the kid behind the counter was like, hello. It's like, this isn't a bust, you know. We want to know about this. So he walks us through the store and tells us all this kind of stuff, you know, and everything. And so we're just listening, you know, and it was just hilarious. And so finally one of the girls says, well, I'm going to buy some gummies or some, little gummies. So she buys some gummies, you know, we're all hee-heeing and everything.
Might raise your hand up and see if he sees it.
Little girl walks in and one of the group said to this guy, now, are you sure it's okay if we just take one? We'll be okay, you know? And the girl that walked in said, ladies, you're not gonna die. It's just marijuana. And we all went, okay. You know? So we grabbed our purses and walked out the door. To our minivan. But it was just hilarious, you know, because I thought they probably thought, what in the world is going on here?
You all tried it, but it didn't do much.
Yeah, we sat in a circle and we all ate a gummy and kind of looked at each other. One girl goes, your ears are getting red, you know? And, okay, well, so no, nobody felt it.
Vicki, were any of the people there, were they suffering any pain or anything?
Probably not. This was strictly investigation, you know, yeah. And so, no.
Okay, let me go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I've got the cream too, but from Taspens. I think you have to have a reputable place you're getting it from. Because some of it, I'm sure people are simply selling.
I know.
No one calling it that. But I agree, the cream, if you just get, you know, occasional back pain, whatever, rub it on, it takes care of it. And I also have the oil drops that just do a couple in the morning, couple at night. I don't get all achy and I mean, it just, but you have to, I think you have to build up to it. The one lady that we talked to said, you've got to take it consistently about 3 weeks. And no
Okay.
THC or anything in any of this stuff, but
3 weeks, that's what
Yeah,
I read.
she
too,
said 3
adults,
weeks.
okay.
and this lady who sold it said she went off of it thinking, maybe this is my imagination that's doing any good. And she said, oh yeah, the same old aches and pains came back and it took her about 3 weeks to build
3
back up.
weeks, okay, great. Let me take the comment from the Happles on Zoom and then let me share with you a few more statistics. Yes, go
Okay,
ahead.
this has to do with the safety. Back in the 60s and 70s, when it started to become popular, the amount of the THC and so forth was relatively low compared to what there is today. And I know that the ladies that went into the dispensary looked around and saw all of these different types. So it has evolved
Yeah.
through breeding of different types of marijuana plants.
Thank you. That's a perfect segue into my next section here, which tells a little more about that. Thank you. From WebMD, a doctor wrote this column that says, according to a 2020 survey, 20% of American seniors say they've tried CBD oil, up from 14% just the prior year. However, it's important to keep in mind what conditions the oil can help and whether it's safe to use. Benefits, this doctor says, arthritis pain, chronic pain, inflammation, muscle spasms, sleep, reduces symptoms related to Alzheimer's. This WebMD article said. Reduces nausea and vomiting for cancer patients being treated. In summary, the CBD oil has been proven effective, non-habit forming for pain. One study found it reduces pain 30% more than traditional medication or medical marijuana alone. This doctor wrote. In short, it enhances quality of life, prevents cognitive decline. He said what to consider what form, think about what you'll be using it for and how to use it. If it's available as an oil, a pill, a drop, or a lotion, consider very small amounts. If you're looking for it with no THC, consider looking for CBD made from hemp. Not all products are the same. Colorado has a very robust, trusted manufacturing facility culture. But if you buy it online from overseas, it may not have gone through any safety testing. Read the label, stay cautious. Some claims, they make claims that can do things that it can't. Risk of CBD oil. Currently, CBD product approved by the FDA is only Epidiolex, used to treat epilepsy, but it's currently being studied for potential treatment in many of these conditions. Some of the risk, dry mouth, diarrhea, tiredness, negative interaction with other certain medications. It's mostly available as an unregulated supplement. It is challenging to pinpoint effective doses and know exactly what you're getting. So talk to your doctor before you do that. Okay, and just a little bit about marijuana safety from the same source here. There's no proof that smoking marijuana causes lung cancer like cigarettes do. This doctor writes, but people who smoke pot do show signs of damage and precancerous changes in their lungs, especially if they also smoke cigarettes. Eating pot might spare you the lung effects of marijuana, but it doesn't mean it's safe because it takes a while for your body to digest marijuana. You might not feel the effects very quickly. And if you keep eating more, then the signs of the overdose can become sudden panic and anxiety. So have to be careful on that. And there's a lot of folks who are still concerned about actress Jen and then Iggy Pop, the rock pop star. Dosage, and here's what we were talking about before. Today's cannabis is super potent. The director of this program says, this is not the marijuana you smoked in the 1970s. You have to be careful. Growers for decades have been crossbreeding and selecting high potency plants to create more powerful pot. Levels of THC averaged 4% in 1995, then went to 17% in 2017. Now you can buy sealed bags at 28%, and they have what's called concentrates that are up to 90%. So you have to be very careful. Fortunately, there are plenty of products that are low in THC and high in CBD, the other major component. Potency varies by strain and form, and it can be tough to gauge a patient's tolerance. You should consult your doctor and approach with caution because of medication interactions, and each person reacts differently because of their size and other physical attributes. It's just, is candy are the edibles lower risk? The gummy bear or the little square contains 10 milligrams of THC. That's 3 to 4 times the amount experts recommend for older adults. Wow. So it sounds like 2 to 3 milligrams is what you're supposed to be looking for the average size older adults.
This is 5
5, so should eat
Well,
half of that, sounds like.
well,
Too late, right?
You need to ride my
I consulted my doctor and said go for it.
Well, one of the things that they're talking about, the difference between swallowing it and smoking it. And gummies, you're not supposed to swallow, you're supposed to let them dissolve.
Oh,
And so therefore, it goes directly into your mucous membranes and it's absorbed into your circulatory system. So that it goes,
thank you.
it's used faster, it's available faster than if it goes all the way down your stomach, has to be digested, and then it goes into your system.
That's why you do the drops.
Yeah, the drops
No, the
are
drops.
the same thing. You don't,
Yeah.
they just are absorbed into your mucous membranes in your cheeks and your throat. and everything.
And why do you put it under your tongue?
This,
Well, because you have more mucous membranes under there. It dissolves easier.
this professor at University of Colorado Pharmacy School says edibles take from 30 minutes to 4 hours to take effect. It's easy to eat more because you aren't feeling anything after a few minutes. Then the effects can last from 6 to 8 hours. There's not enough good science yet on a lot of this. It's cannabis is still a Schedule I controlled substance on par with heroin and LSD. That's why doctors can't technically prescribe it. They can only give you state-required permission to use it. Most importantly, scientists can't buy it at a dispensary and study it in most labs. That research gap means only a handful of common uses are backed by evidence in human trials. Other popular uses for dementia, cancer, glaucoma are less solid, but they're being studied. So that's where.
Wouldn't this,
Steve, how do you spell that Epidiolex?
I can go back and get that for you, Jim. Sure, hang on just a second.
there it is.
There it is.
Epidiolex.
You got, I'm slow. You gotta EPIDIOLEX.
Right, Epidiolex.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Question on the effect. I've heard that people, and we've seen it in the papers, people getting drunk. For some people, they get angry, belligerent, more likely to do violence against their spouse, their kids. I've heard, and I may be dead wrong, that marijuana is kind of the opposite. People become groovy, man, peace. Don't get belligerent and angry. So that's a question. And then the second one is a question on sexuality. We know if somebody gets roaring drunk, their inhibition drops, but their performance, or their inhibitions go away, but their performance goes to hell. And I wondered if marijuana does the same thing. It probably decreases your inhibition, but probably kicks your performance down too. Anybody have any comments on alcohol and marijuana relative to violence and your sexuality?
We're kind of old in here.
I was gonna say, are we gonna try this?
Here we go, here's an answer.
Sure, Ross.
On the alcohol,
Got it.
alcohol tends to increase the feeling that you have before you started. So if you're in a bad mood when you start,
Got it.
alcohol will make it even, it'll expand it and make it even worse.
Okay.
Marijuana, I used to work in counseling and addiction years ago. Marijuana is a little bit of a, it's not a depressant like alcohol is, but it does tend to mellow and smooth you out.
Okay.
And, and I don't know about the sex part. We never got into that.
There are two basic differences between alcohol and marijuana. Alcohol goes through the body within 12 to 24 hours, but marijuana, the THC, seems to hold into the fat cells of the body for up to 6 weeks. So you gotta be a little careful about having, driving or working or something, and then somebody says, well, are you under the influence? And
Yeah.
even though you might have not had anything for, say, 3 or 4 weeks, it'll still show up in a test.
The tetrahydrocannabinol, the part that's the active ingredient in marijuana, it does store in the fatty cells of our bodies. So as we burn that fat off, if we've been doing enough of the marijuana, we'll actually experience another high. So that's one of the dangers of marijuana. It'll store itself in your fat cells and begin to release as you start to work it out. So, and it does last a lot longer. Alcohol, within about a day, the liver reduces and breaks down the alcohol quickly. But yeah, THC stores in the fat cells of the body.
CBD doesn't.
No, CBD is totally different.
My daughter used to work where they did pre-employment testing. And I mean, people had to plan, when they were going to get tested.
Sure.
Lasted for so long.
Okay, I want to share just a couple more things with you. It's 11:15 and leave plenty of time for discussion here. Here's a map from 2019 that I could find, current marijuana laws by state. Looks like in the West, of course, there's more approval of recreational and medical. So Colorado has both. In the middle, of course, South Dakota, North Nebraska and Kansas had nothing at that point. I'm not sure where they're at now. And then a mix of things in the Northeast and Southeast. So, but it shows that there's a lot of something going on in almost every state, some kind of approval, either medical or recreational. Okay, last section here. Let's talk about the stigma and the public perception and what some Christian views are on this today. I want to read to you a couple highlights from a New York Times article by a young Christian who said that I had pain in my limbs for months and went to doctors and tried many medications and had nothing, no relief. In the depths of my despair, I visited a so-called green doctor in Venice Beach, California, and he put me on medical marijuana. That very evening, I sampled a small dose and experienced what I call a miracle. He said, and I could lift my head for the first time in months, and I wept for more than an hour with joy that I had found some relief. Ever since the newly formed religious right enlisted in the Reagan Revolution, conservative Christians have been reliable supporters on the war on drugs. But many prominent Christian pastors and leaders I've spoken with told me that they are quietly changing their minds on the matter of marijuana and CBD. Others who remain skeptical admit that much has changed since the 80s. For starters, in this writer's opinion, Christians should easily affirm the use of cannabis for medical purposes. The research is growing that it is very effective for many conditions, and this has led more than 30 states to approve its use. Christian ethics have long taught that the faithful must take an active role in caring for the ailing among us. The New Testament commands people of God to engage in healing the sick, an act that plays a central role in Jesus' ministry. In fact, one of Jesus' most famous parables, Matthew 25, lists the human willingness to care for the sick as one of our chief criteria. In at least one instance, the Apostle Paul wrote that encouraging his protege Timothy to use a potentially harmful substance for the sake of healing and health. No longer drink water exclusively, Paul writes in 1 Timothy 5:23, but use a little wine for the sake of your stomach and your frequent ailments. So that's a quick summary of this young man's view. What do you think? Where are Christians today? Well, especially conservative and liberal Christians.
Take a heavy dose and you'll probably hear God talk to you.
Oh my God.
I I would imagine in conservative congregations that there is still quite a stigma on using it, and that our discussion like this today probably wouldn't go on in a very conservative congregation. But what do you think? I want to hear.
Well, in trying to be Christian and thinking about this subject, God has given us a wonderful body and a mind to think with. And I've wondered, is it right for us to befuddle that brain by using, alcohol and narcotics? But on alcohol, Jesus in parties, they had wine and he never seemed to speak against it.
There's one passage where doesn't Jesus say that I'm accused of being a drunkard and my followers of drinking too much?
One thing, back then, water was not
Say, yeah.
safe.
Purified.
So, wine is the alcohol in it, gets rid of a lot of, I'll say, dirt. So that's why they drank so much.
Okay. Okay, can I ask Rev Jerry?
Remove inhibitions, and so it's a social lubrication. It helps people be more sociable and outgoing.
Yes. Jerry, what do you think? And what do Methodists think on this today? What have you heard?
I think the strict Methodist line is, according to our resolutions, is, of course, we can't support anything that's not legal. So, but this is the conundrum with weed, right? Is that it's it's legal on a state level and not on a federal level.
Yes.
So in my experience with weed, I think that this is the issue. It's real easy for the state to legalize recreational use of weed, but if it's not legal at a federal level, you run into roadblocks with banking.
Yeah.
You run into roadblocks with the health system. And so that's really I think the biggest problem in our country right now, the stigma that's on it. But from that perspective, I struggle with legalizing it on a state level and not on a federal level. If it was legal on a federal level, research could take place. A lot of stuff could move. But I don't think it's fair either. I don't think it's a good argument to say that, Paul said this and that, right? And I don't think that, you can use a blanket statement like, well, the New Testament says to heal people. Look, bloodletting used to be a common practice in the Middle Ages.
What is that?
Bloodletting, that's literally where they suck the blood out of your system and then put it back in. So that used to be a common medical treatment, right? So I think you have to be careful about using, ancient world arguments for health in modern times to justify using something like weed for medical purposes. I'm not sure that's a coherent reason or argument. But I'll be honest, I'm very mixed where this is concerned. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. I'm not gonna sit here and say I never did it. I was different when I was young. I rode around a different crowd of people. I think that my social circles had more to do with it than anything.
Sure.
I was a skater. I was your typical skateboard 1980s punk kid. And that it was just very common. But
absolutely,
I was a kid, right? And nowadays it's different. So my views are mixed. I think personally that the church really doesn't have any say on this as long as it's illegal at a federal level. I don't think we can condone it. I think what Jim said about your body is very relevant. You have to be really careful when you put anything into your body. Look, if some of you are taking, what's the difference between, I would pose this question. What's the difference between, smoking a joint for pain and taking Oxycontin?
yes, right.
And there are people that take Oxycontin. I know bodybuilders personally that now, because of their careers, have really, really horrible joint pain and back pain. And these guys take, one of the guy I know, he takes Oxycontin regularly, daily. And if he didn't take it, he literally could not walk.
Yeah.
That's how much pain he's in. And you know, and Oxycontin is a substance that is really, really hard on your system, that alters your chemistry. Cholesterol medicine, you know what I mean? So I think if we look at weed and we have these arguments about that how we treat our bodies and the things that we put in it, the reasons that we put them in there. And that's my biggest issue with this whole thing, right? Is that until it's legal at a federal level and real medical studies can take place, where there's a lot of data that can give us very reasonable scientific arguments for its use, we're all speculating. You know what I mean?
A lot of speculation. Yep. Jim, real quick, please, and then I want to give Zoomers a chance. We've got 5 minutes left.
One of the things that Jerry said that I think is right on, is that when it's not legal at the federal level. And at the same time, we're arguing that we don't have enough data to support legalization and one of the reasons we don't have data is because it's not legalized. And this sounds like catch-22 to me, that we are here at a point where there's tons of anecdotal evidence about this being valuable. But we don't have enough evidence. We don't have enough evidence about the dosage. We don't have about what type is useful. And the reason we don't have that evidence is because it's not legal.
Right. It's a catch-22.
This is a type of insanity to me, is to repeat the same thing that doesn't work over and over again because it doesn't work.
When you have to think about supply too, I mean, there's an economic side to this. I mean, look, if you federalize marijuana, there are going to be some real ramifications with countries like Mexico and South America where these cartels exist. And it's going to generate violence. They're not going to be happy about it. You know, this happened in Colorado. It happened in California. When they first legalized marijuana in California, they saw a notable rise in violence because the cartels were not happy about it. And, you know, these guys would open up these dispensaries and the next thing you know, they're getting shot on the sidewalk, you know, by some gang member.
Because it took the profits away from.
Yeah, it's money out of their pocket.
Of the cartel.
Yeah, you know, so it's a very nuanced kind of thing, right? And like you said, look, I'm a firm believer that the war on drugs was complete BS. I'm sorry, I'm gonna say it out loud. It was all BS and it did more harm than good. And I think there's plenty of statistics to show that. And so it's a reality. You know what I mean? And because of that stigma that's on it, it's as much as we want to federalize it, even to research it and to do something with it, I don't know. That's going to be a really, really hard sell, I think, to the majority of American people.
It's a complicated topic. It's in flux.
I
Okay, I want to go to Zoomers, please. I'll come back to you, Joy, okay? Susan, I want to ask you what's going on in Canada with it, if you mind sharing. Susan's in Toronto, Canada.
I can't speak for all of the provinces, but in Ontario, it's sold. I don't know, you know, how much people are using it for recreational versus medical use, and I don't know the medical position on it, like Kaiser's was referenced earlier, but I know from going back and forth from between Toronto and Denver has far more pot shops than Toronto does. So I don't think that the uptake is quite as great.
Okay, thank you. Peggy, you got your hand up. You want to make a brief comment?
Yeah, just real quickly, CSU opened this last year in their chemistry department, a state-of-the-art research lab to look into this. And there's so much you can say about all this, but one of the things that they're specifically looking into, they're working with the veterinary school at CSU. So they're working between both of them. And I agree with what Jerry was saying. I think we're learning more about pot than we know about most of the medications that are man-made that we ever put into our bodies. So it's kind of an interest, you know, do we even question what we're taking so much of the time? And so it's kind of interesting to look at. But I heard someone from the state talking, and they are ones that work with the legislators, and it's a state office. And they were just saying the really big problem is how there is no consistent labeling. When we look at a food label, we know exactly what we're looking at. But when we go, you know, cannabis shop to cannabis shop to cannabis shop, those shops are all labeling different. And so, that's a really big problem at this point. And students like it because there is no hangover. And they have seen, this tremendous increase in high schools across Colorado, and the counselors are just blown away by it. But the kids are all saying, your top flight kids who've never done even alcohol are saying there's no hangover. So it is a very complex issue.
Like you think on a college level, what I'm more concerned about. I'm not concerned about the kid sitting in his dorm room smoking a joint as much as I am this high performance gal or guy who's popping Adderall 5 times a day illegally, I might add, so that they can stay awake and focused on their studies. What are the long-term effects of that? Because that kind of stuff is happening. I mean, I can tell you, I go to an Ivy League school, right? And it happens. There's so much pressure to perform. You know what I mean? And the work is so academically rigorous in some settings that, they feel like their only option is to pop Adderall all day. So it's like, there's this toss and turn.
Is Adderall legal or not?
I don't think so.
Adderall's like,
Yeah, it's by prescription.
Right.
Your doctor, these kids are selling it. They're selling it
Every
like street
convenience store has these high performance, little red bottles of high caffeine stuff that kids are overdosing on too.
But
We need to wrap up in just a couple minutes. Let me go to Joy first and then Vicky for the last.
I was just gonna say, we could make $1 million if we figure out how to take the smell out of it.
that you're sitting here with this.
Out of marijuana.
So are there any chemists in the class?
Good point. Okay, Vicky.
I'm just wondering if there isn't a problem here between the pharmaceutical companies and the cannabis industry,
You bet.
because can they limit that? Because if cannabis could be a cure-all, not a cure-all, but at least higher than what we look at it now, than pharmaceuticals, wouldn't that be a real problem for them? So can't they there could be some regulation issues going on here, which is not fair, That's kind of bad.
Very good. It's 11:32. What a good conversation. Thank you for a good civil conversation today. And Share, maybe let's do this again. Follow up and see on this type of issue what comes.
Yeah, so I just one last thing. So there's a show on Netflix. I think it's called Murder Mountain. And a lot of people don't know this, but like almost 80 to 90% of the nation's our cannabis supply comes from one region in Northern California. And it's this kind of mountainous, very plush, the soil is just perfect, the climate is perfect. So but most of them are illegal growers. And the show is about that. It's about that little Northern California community. And they have like exposés of both types of growers. They have the illegal growers and then the legal growers. But they talk about the process to move from one to the other and how it is so arduous, right? And so complicated to grow it legally that a lot of them just opt to grow it illegally and sell it on the black market. Right. So see, that's a whole other thing you have to think about. Right? Is the process of growing weed legally in volume is very, very complicated. And a lot of these cats are,
Isn't that the same problem that alcohol producers, guys that produce whiskey in Kentucky?
Exactly. You're exactly, but that's the same thing, right? Like, you look at prohibition, right? Like, and the big, industry of alcohol consumption or even tobacco. But so it's a really good show. If you want to kind of get into this culture and where this supply is coming from, it's fascinating.
What's it called again?
It's called Murder Mountain.
It is called that. I've seen it. And the backstory is that I believe the young man was from San Diego and he went up there and to join that industry, and he ended up disappearing, basically getting murdered. And his father, this whole show is his father going up there and trying to find out what really happened to his son.
Yeah.
And in that process, they really, as you say, Jerry, they really analyze the whole system of legal and illegal marijuana.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Good. Thanks for the recommendation. Okay, I want to do a real quick prayer.
Oh,
and
this is where the prayer comes in.
This is where the prayer comes in, yeah, and then wish you all well. Lord, thank you for being with us, and please lead us in wisdom in considering these kind of issues. We thank you for all your blessings. Please go in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
Thank you, Steve. Bye.
Bye.
Share your stuff.